Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Lane. I'm here to present the 10 free tech tips to increase efficiency in your data-driven decision making. I'm actually a bit south of most of you, so I'm in the Cincinnati area with the district North College Hill City Schools. We're a very small district in Cincinnati, like right outside most of the Cincinnati public schools. We only have 4 schools, elementary, middle, high, and an alternative/virtual school. I was hired first as a data coach through a grant, along with a couple other data coaches. That was 3 years ago now. So I spent 2 years in that position before they then decided that they wanted to continue my work through a district data coordinator position. So that's what I'm doing now. We're making big strides in our data-driven decision making. Of course, the pandemic slowed us down just like everyone else. But we've really worked to create some awesome systems and make sure that we are creating the most efficient ways for teachers and staff members to use their data. We don't want it to be another thing. We don't want it to be something else that's going to take up teachers' time or any staff members' time. So that's really my goal, is just to try to figure out everything I can to make it the most efficient process for everyone. So that kind of brings us to today's presentation. These tips are all on Google, so Google Sheets, Google Forms mostly. We do dive into Google Apps Scripts a little bit. Don't freak out, it's okay. I'll lead you through, it'll all be okay. And then we will also talk very briefly about Data Studio. So what you might learn today, how to download and import, connect spreadsheets, use VLOOKUP filters, pivot tables, control forms with sheets. That's when we start dipping our toes into app scripts. Dump data into a sheet, create a custom menu, use COUNTIF. And then I also have some great resources to share with you so that you can extend your learning and some inspiration as well, so you can see kind of how we've started using all of these in our district. All right, so let's start with download and import. You always want to start with a CSV file. If you can't find a CSV file, that's fine. We'll do Excel. It'll all be okay. But for these tips to mostly work, you're going to want to import a CSV file or an Excel file into a Google Sheet. So we're not downloading the file into Drive and opening it there. We want to import it into a sheet that's already existing. All right, so it's going to save you a lot of headaches if you just download the CSV. All that means is it's some kind of file that Google Sheets can read, Excel can read. So it actually stands for comma separated values. I almost said file. Comma separated values. So these platforms know how to read that. And there are 2 different ways that I usually import the data. I either go with replace data. Okay, so when you click on import, it's going to give you these options: replace data at selected cell, or the other one that I sometimes use is to append to current sheet. And those can kind of serve 2 different purposes for you. Replace is what you're going to do when you have like a list that you want to update regularly, such as student lists. So you don't want to go in there and have to add each student one by one every time you get a new student, or remove students one by one every time a student leaves. Instead, you're just going to replace the whole list. So that would be replace data at selected cell. In those cases, you probably want to wipe out all the data and then replace that selected cell. And then the other option that we talked about was appending data. So this is what you want to use if you want to add to a list that you already have. I download absence records and referrals every week on Mondays. I'm not going to go back and download all the referrals for the past, I think I have 4 years in the system. I'm not going to do that every Monday because that would take forever for me to download and then put into Google Sheets. Instead, I'm just going to add to the bottom of my list. All right, same thing with absence records. On Mondays, I add to the bottom of my list. And the next thing we're going to talk about is import range. So a lot of these are going to kind of follow a scenario. Sorry for the bell. There will be another one in a few minutes. Shocking. Oh, that was just a weird lunch bell. Okay. And this scenario is that you have a list of students on a Google Sheet that you update regularly. You want to add a column to your data that shows which students are in which after-school clubs. You know that your secretary keeps an updated list on her Google Sheet. You want her data on your spreadsheet, but you don't want to have to keep going back and copying and pasting. because you're probably going to forget to do that, and then your list is not going to be updated. We are going to solve that problem with import range. All right, so this is what you would type into your sheet, and I give you the formula right there. All right, so you're going to look for the cell where you want her data to appear. I'll show you an example in just a second. You're going to type equals import range. This red line is going to be where her URL is. So URL is just whatever's in that address bar at the top of the screen when you're on her page. The sheet or the tab name, and then the columns that you want to pull over. If she makes any updates on her sheet, it's going to update all of your stuff automatically. So that's what we want to happen. Okay, so here's my list. These are all fake names, don't worry about it. These are all of the students that I've downloaded. This is her list now. So see your data, this is her data. And she has a student name list, and then also the bands that they're in. The after school clubs that they're in. Apparently I was reading bin when I said that. Okay, so you're going to go to your spreadsheet, same thing here, add a new tab, and then in that cell where you want her data to appear, you're going to type in import range. You can see this is a URL, all right? Get this from up here. The sheet name, in her case, she hasn't renamed that sheet, so it's just sheet 1. And then the columns that you want to pull over from her list, columns A and B. What that's going to do is it's going to bring over all of her data. It will show as hashtag REF exclamation point at first. If you hover over it, this box will appear, and you're just going to click on allow access, and that will bring everything over. Okay, next we're going to talk about VLOOKUP. Same scenario, but now you want to have her data, or now you have her data on your spreadsheet, but it's on that separate tab. So you want to be able to pull that over to a column on your sheet. All right. Again, this is just one scenario that I'm going to walk through and give you all these tips throughout this scenario. But what I really want you to be thinking about is how you can use this in other ways. VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP is magic. So you're going to type this into your sheet in the first cell where you want the club to appear. It's going to be VLOOKUP. What you're going to need is a cell reference of the name that you're looking up. I'll show you what that means in just a moment. Sheet name, columns, column of data that you want to pull, and then it's going to be true or false depending on whether the data is sorted. All right. Again, if she makes any corrections to her sheet, they will carry over to yours automatically. So let's look at what that will look like on your sheet. All right. So this is your data. Remember, you have your data on that first sheet, and then you already brought her data over using import range. This is your list, and this is a column that you want those school clubs to show up in. All right. So we're using VLOOKUP. That first part was the cell reference of the first name. Okay, so that's A2, right? A, column A, and row 2. Her data is the name of the tab that you're taking the names from, or taking the clubs from. A, B are the 2 columns, and this is where it starts to get just a tiny bit tricky. All right, so let's follow this. A is the first column of the data that you selected from her data, and that should match your key. All right, remember your key is this first part, so that should match the name. So that's basically what you're looking for on this list should be in that first column that you select. All right. B is the last column of data that you selected. That should match what you want to pull over. So we're looking for this name, we're figuring out what's in column B, and we want that to show up in the after school club column. Okay. So A is the key, that's what we're looking for. B is what we want to be pulling over. Since B is the second column, so we're starting here, and then we're going over 1 column. That's where that 2 comes from right here. And then talk about false here in a second. If your sheet name has more than 1 word, you must add apostrophes on either side. So in the first situation, we just had sheet 1. Don't worry about apostrophes in that case, okay, because it's all 1 word. So if there's a space in between, gotta have those apostrophes. If the first column of your data is sorted alphabetically or numerically, then you want to change that last part of the formula to true rather than false. So I almost always use false automatically, and then if there's an issue, I go back and double check to see if it is sorted, and then I'll try true to make sure that it's working correctly. And then finally, you're going to double click or click and drag on the little blue box right here. See how that we showed up in the after school club? That's because we use that VLOOKUP formula. We want that to extend through all of the students. You're just going to double click on that little blue box, and it's just going to bring all the after school clubs over according to the names that are on the left side. All right, next thing we want to make sure that we know how to do is use the filters. Filters are built into Google Sheets. It makes your life a lot easier if you know how to use these appropriately. You always want to freeze the first row, that header row. If you don't freeze that first row, then your header row is going to get sorted along with all the other data, and it's going to make it more difficult to read that data. Next, you want to select all the data. Easiest way to do that is to click in that top left corner. Click the filter button. So that's this button right here. And then you have these little triangles that show up right by the headers, and you can use those to sort the data or filter the data however you'd like. They also have it filtered by color now, is one way that you can do it. So if you have certain names that are highlighted in red, yellow, green, then you could sort out all the red, all the yellow, all the green. Otherwise, you can use them just like you would any other filter. Pivot tables, another magic trick of Google Sheets. You want to select all of the data. Click on Pivot Table under the Insert menu, and a little box will pop up. You're going to click Create on that box. And then you're going to select what data you want to use in the rows, columns, and what you want the values to be. So in this case, I did the rows as the grade levels. Right? So I have each grade level there. And I wanted the columns to show me how many after-school clubs, or how many students are in each after-school club, so that I could look at, in grade 2, I can see that there are 2 kids in the Glee club. Yes, I usually go through and highlight all this and center it because it's just otherwise very difficult to read. You can also add grid lines that might make it easier as well. And then the values are going to be whatever you want to show up here in the middle. I would say in 90% of the cases that I use pivot tables, I am going to summarize by count A. Basically, that just means we're looking at the names and we're counting how many names, how many unique names fall under each of those qualifications. So how many unique names are in kindergarten and band? There are 3 unique names. I went ahead and added a video in here. I added a few videos throughout just so that you could have some extra resources to kind of dig in a little bit deeper. Just because pivot tables, there's so much that you can do with pivot tables. That would be a whole nother presentation on its own. So I just wanted to give you just a tiny bit of a taste and give you some resources to kind of move forward from here. All right, now we're going to get into controlling forms with sheets. So this scenario is going to continue. You would like the teachers to log student absences on a Google form each time they host an after-school club. You want to be able to connect the data from the Google form to your Google Sheet, but in order to do so, you need the names to match your student list exactly. So you don't want teachers going in there and typing the names of students who are absent. If they are doing that, chances are spelling mistakes will occur, punctuation, capitalization, the list goes on and on and on. You want them to be able to select students rather than typing in the names. But you don't want to just add a list of students, because what if you get a new student? You don't want to have to go back and say, oh yeah, I need to add that student to the Google form. You want it to do it in the background so you don't have to worry about anything. You just update your student list, everything else fixes itself. You're going to create your form, create the Google form, but leave the options empty. Open your Google Sheet. Open the app scripts under the extensions menu. Okay, so extensions, app scripts. Pause, take a deep breath, because what you're about to see is going to seem scary, but I promise I'll walk you through it and I'll show you exactly what to change. Don't look at the gray just yet. All right, so you're going to click through any introductory boxes. I think when you first get onto AppScript, it's like, oh, welcome to your dashboard or something like that. You can just click through that, click OK or whatever it says. You'll see a little bit written in the project window that comes up. I believe it'll say function, my function, and just have a couple brackets. Just delete all of that that's in there and make sure it's just completely empty. And then you're going to copy and paste this script. So you have a copy of this this presentation. You'll also have an ebook that goes along with it that you can copy from if that's easier for you. You're going to copy everything in the script, and then you're going to paste it into the window that is on your screen. All right. So it's going to have all of this in there. I've marked with these little like slashes. Those are forward slashes, not backslash, but forward slash, whatever they are. I've marked all the spots that you need to look for. Okay, so it says adjust these values. So it's these 4 lines. Do not edit anything below this line. So you don't have to worry about any of that. Just pretend it's not there. Okay, it's scary looking, I know. Pretend it's not there. What you need to pay attention to is the form URL. So the URL of the Google form that you made. Remember, you get that from the address bar. The sheet name. All right, so the sheet name is where you are finding the list of students. Okay, so the sheet name is your data. All right. Column of names is going to be the number, column names. Then the column number where your list of students is located. And then item number is going to be what number is the question on the form. Is it the first question, second question? In my case, I just made a form that said who is absent today or something similar to that. And then I made sure it was multiple choice. And then I left the options blank, remember. So it was the very first question. So we put 1 there, okay? So again, our form URL on our sheet of data, or on our spreadsheet of data, what sheet or tab has the list of student names? What column is the student names in, first column, and what number is the question on the form? In our case, it's the first question. All right, so you're going to click run and click through the prompts to give the script permission to run. You'll get some pop-ups that ask you to give permission to the script. And then you're going to set up a trigger so that it refreshes the list on the form every night overnight. I put a quick little video in here. I'm not going to walk you through those steps. It's pretty much just selecting a few options on the drop downs and then you're good to go. So that's not anything too challenging, but there are some different options you have there that you can watch a little bit more. All right, next scenario. You want to pull over the results from the absence form every evening so you can keep track of how many absences the students have. You want to encourage the teachers to have their attendance in before 4 p.m. So you would like to set the trigger to begin pulling the data from the form at 4 p.m. All right. So you want to be able to say, listen, it's going to mark those absences you have to have those absences marked by 4 p.m. Otherwise, they won't go into the system. Okay. First step is going to be to create a spreadsheet with the results from the absence form. So this is our form. And if you go to responses, you're just going to click this little button to create a spreadsheet. And then you're going to create a new sheet to house the data from the form on your data. Okay. So this is a spreadsheet that you create through the form, but what you want on your data is a new sheet that's going to house the data that is pulled over. Next step is to follow steps 2 and 3 from the control forms with sheets tip, but copy the script below instead. So again, you're going to go into app scripts under extensions. You're going to delete everything that's there or add to it at the bottom. And you're going to add this script. Again, you don't have to worry about anything underneath that. Do not edit below this line. You're only going to adjust these 3 things. The name of your sheet where you'd like the data to be housed. So we name that new sheet absence tracker. The URL to the form responses spreadsheet. So that's that new spreadsheet that you created based on the form responses. And then the number of columns on your form responses spreadsheet. So in my case, I only had one question on that Google form. So when I created the response spreadsheet, I had timestamp, email address, and that one question. Those are the 3 columns that get pulled over to my spreadsheet. And then again, you're going to set up a trigger to refresh the list on the form every night overnight, and you're going to set the trigger for 4 p.m. And so not every night overnight, but you know what I'm saying. So you can go back and watch that video if you'd like. All right, next one is to create a custom menu. So one of your teachers had an emergency. She was not able to enter the absences before 4 p.m. You're like, okay, that's fine. I understand that happens. But you want to be able to refresh your form responses manually when appropriate. That way you're not having to wait until the next day for those absences to kick back in. So you again are going to go into AppScripts under extensions. This time you're going to copy and paste this. You have 2 things here to change. The name of the menu that you want to create. We're creating a custom menu, so it's going to show up like up by your help. You'll see it here in a second. You want a name for that menu, and then you want a name for whatever you select on the menu. In this case, I just made it the same for both of them, and whatever script that clicking on that menu choice will run. We want to run the data dump script from this. This is the script we want to run. This is the name right here. We want to run that whenever we click on this option on the menu. And refresh your spreadsheet. Make sure that you hit save. Please, please, please hit save. And then refresh the spreadsheet. When you refresh it, you'll see that now you have your own custom menu up here with the option to refresh absence list. So this right here is the menu name. So that's going to be right here. And this is the name of the option in this case. So it's kind of confusing because I made them both the same. And then when you click on this button, it's going to run the data dump script from number 7 that we were on previously. Okay, so what that means is whenever you click this, it is going to refresh your data from the response data. This would be another way that you could use import range also. It just kind of depends on what you're doing. In this case, you could really use either. In some cases, it's better to use the data dump script and be able to just copy and paste it over whenever. In some cases, it's more efficient to use import range. I would say the most often I use import range. However, if I start adding in a whole bunch of formulas and everything to a spreadsheet, then it's going to start to slow down a little bit. So then I just want it to dump the data overnight. That way it's not having to rely on that separate formula to pull in the data from the other sheet. Another situation is if it's tied to some kind of Google form where people are entering in data nonstop. Like we have a form that we use for Trojan Bucks, which is kind of like our positive incentive money. Students are entering, sometimes it's like right before an incentive and they're entering 100 within 2 minutes. In that case, I don't want to use import range because it is going to slow everything down. Every time I try to make a move, it slows it all down. All right, next is count if. So let's say you want to keep track of how many absences each student has in their after school club. We're going to use count if. So remember we have, myself down here. Remember we have each student listed on our student list with all of their demographics, and then we also have a column for the after school clubs we are in. We want another column to show how many absences on that sheet. So here we go. Names. Oh, it's raining hard out there. Names, all of their demographics, what after school club they're in, and then we now want the number of absences. So we are going to type in this formula, count if, the sheet name of the responses. Okay, so I think we labeled it absence tracker. Oh, yep, it's right there, absence tracker. The column of the names on the response sheet. and then this is just going to be pasted, so you don't need to mess with that at all. And then the cell reference of the first student's name in your data. So again, that cell reference is A2, because that's where the first name shows up. So here's your example. That's exactly what I have written here. And then just like before, you're going to double click and it's going to pull down for all of them. So again, as your secretary makes updates to the list of after school clubs, they're going to show up here. That's not what that should say though. I should change that. As your absence data is dumped into your sheet every day at 4 p.m., that is when these number of absences are going to refresh. So if you come in here, and it'll actually be, I think you have to give it an hour of time, so between 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. So then at 5 p.m., if you're working, which you shouldn't be, but we know what happens. At 5 p.m., you can go in there and see the updated number of absences for every student. All right, so I want to be able to send you off with a few other places to learn more. These are some other ways that I use AppScripts. I use it to send emails. I know there's lots of different add-ons that can do that for you as well. A lot of times I want to be able to customize a bit more than what the add-ons allow you to do, so I have my own script written for that. You can turn any list of steps into a script that you can run from the menu. So let's say you want to be able to click a button, then when you click the button, you want it to highlight the names that are duplicates, or count. No, usually I would use this for like format options. So yeah, like highlighting, bolding, adjusting widths of columns, resizing rows. You can make any list like that. Pretty much anything you can do in a Google Sheet, you can make it all run together using a single script, and you just click the button and it happens. You can create a whole Google form from a spreadsheet. You can tell it what you want all the options to be, and it'll create that whole Google form for you. You can create documents from a template and a list of data. So I have a system that keeps track of professional development hours for teachers, CEUs, and everything. Whenever they submit into the Google form a pre-approval or approval of CEUs, it creates a document that has all of the information on there that can be printed for the LPTC, and they can review it either online or on the document, and that document is also for the staff members' records as well. It gets sent to them automatically. You can create multiple copies and share each copy with a different staff member. So I have certain templates that I send out to everyone on, or all the teaching staff typically, like curriculum documents or reteaching forms, and I'll just click a button and it'll send a copy to each person on that list and share it with them as well. You can also record timestamps whenever a column is edited. If you are ever looking for ways to use it, if you're like, oh, I wonder if AppScripts can do this for me, you're just going to Google whatever it is and then add at the end Google Sheets AppScript. There are a ton of resources online. That's pretty much how I learned how to do AppScripts. I would type things into Google, take the script, and then figure out what I need to change. There's also a YouTube channel, Learn Google Spreadsheets. That's kind of all-encompassing with formulas and AppScripts. It's an awesome place to go. That's pretty much where I've learned almost everything. Okay, so a few ways that we use Google Sheets. This is a standards tracker for a couple of teachers that are using more of an individualized standards or an individualized pathway structure in their classrooms. One of them being our Algebra 1 teacher. This, you can keep notes on each student's progress. When you check them, it adds an updated date to the note. All of that goes onto its own dashboard, so you can see when the students mastered each particular skill and how many students have mastered each skill. This is the reteach form that we use. This was kind of like this was my first baby. I took the OIP. I took the OIP and kind of put it on a Google Sheet so that teachers weren't having to do all the math themselves. So this basically keeps track, you'll see a few other pieces of it here in a minute, but it keeps track of the assessment scores, all the growth, and then the reteach plan. These check marks get checked as they finish each section. They don't have to check them, it checks them itself. This is what it looks like with the data. So it gives you all kinds of data. The teachers only add in what standard it is, the date of the assessment, and the data itself. I also have it set up to re-roster their forms every Monday so that they can keep it updated. This is where they have their reteach plan on that form. They go through 8 cycles of that. This is a curriculum document that I made. So this is all on Google Sheets as well. And it has everything from the scope and sequence, all their standards and objectives, unit plans, unit objectives, all the way down to lesson plans. This is just a title page that shows the number of units and the names of those units. This is where all their standards go. I made a script that fills in all of their standards for them, and then they just have to break them into objectives and check which unit each of those go to. This is what the unit page looks like. So they only fill in the pink reddish color, and then the blue color comes in automatically. So based on what they checked on that last page, it'll bring in the standards and objectives for them. They check off what days they're going to address each of those objectives. It gives them a nice pretty calendar of what days each unit is on. And then they also have a lesson plan page where they just fill in the pink red color again. Everything else gets pulled over automatically. So we're cutting out as much of that repetitive work as possible. They only have to check boxes after they fill in the objectives. They don't have to keep rewriting them or copying and pasting them. And everything gets put in one place. It's very easy for our admin to pull it up whenever they'd like to review. So it's a great resource for them. If you want to extend your knowledge even more, the next place I would go would be Data Studio, which is also part of the Google Suite and also free. Data Studio can basically take whatever data you have, as long as it's a row of headers and all the rows of data underneath it, and make it into a beautiful dashboard. So I'll show you some examples here, but basically it's magic. I fell in love with it the moment I was introduced to it, which just happened to be the day before my birthday 3 years ago. And I will never forget. It was our tech director that showed it to me, and I was like, thank you for the birthday present. And so it is, I mean, this has changed my life. I'm not even gonna lie about that. There's a quick video here where you can kind of get started with Google Data Studio. This is the most up-to-date version I found. This is mostly used in the business world. It's not used a ton in the education world, but I'm trying to push it out there and trying to show people how great it is. There is a learning curve, but once you get it down, it is magic. You can create things like this, like a student data dashboard that has the number of students that fall into each risk level, attendance tiers, referral tiers, math tiers, reading tiers. This has been kind of a baby of mine and one of the instructional coaches, Kelly Knauer, who works at the elementary school. It was kind of her idea, and then we just took it and have extended it so much. So this is the summary page. And this is one of the pages that comes off of the summary page, which kind of dives a little bit more into district referrals. All of this can be filtered in any different way. This is the student-specific page. So this, you can look up any student. It'll give all their demographic information. Little boxes will pop up if they're gifted. If they're in kindergarten, a box will pop up with their KRA score. And it gives their tier, the tier for which they should be receiving supports. And that is for attendance, behavior, reading, and math. Each of these links takes you to a dashboard that kind of breaks it down more specifically. And then we also have additional dashboards, state test data. We have contact data you'll see here in a second. I've also added ACT data and high school credit data. This is the attendance dashboard. So if you were to click on this link, you would get the attendance dashboard, which is that same student. It's going to break down all of their attendances and show you all of the notes, attendances, absences. This is a behavior dashboard, same thing. You click on that link, and that's going to give you all of the information about any referrals, positive referrals, documentations that student has. If you click on the math and reading pages are kind of extensive because they have all of the iReady data that we have. It has state test data, ACT if you're in high school, and intervention data, which you'll see here in a second. I'll show you the ELA intervention data. This, again, you have the iReady reading. You have additional assessments, so that's KRA, state scores, and now we also have ACT in here. And then also for our elementary students, we are tracking all of the interventions that we put in place for Tier 2 and Tier 3. So this is what they look at when they're making decisions about whether or not their students should still be pulled out for additional supports. This page also replaces a large portion of the RIMS. So since they have all that data on there, they just put a couple cover pages on there, have the meeting with the parent guardian, and that counts. That's counting as part of their RIM because it's connected to their RIM codes as well. And then you have, this is for high school, credits earned. Actually, I think middle school credits are on there too if they take any high school courses. It has them by subject, and then it has each course listed as well. This is a contact form, so this is just going to show a specific contact for that student, who the contact was, the reason, the response, whether or not they got a response. This is going to be a very generic view at the contacts. The form that they fill in does take notes and everything, but for this particular reason, since anybody can view this, we kept it very generic. State test scores, this is comparing if they took multiple tests, and then it has all the tests listed below. This is more district data that we're looking at in order to determine action steps. So in this case, we're looking at students' growth on those 3D forms the reteaching forms that I showed you earlier. In this case, we're looking at growth from iReady scores. This is the LPDC staff dashboard that I was talking about earlier, which tracks their goals, their licenses, whether or not they're ready to renew, any CEUs, pre-approvals, all of that's linked in here. And then the actual committee has their own dashboard that they use to then approve things as they come in. This is the contact logs. This, when you log into it, it only shows you your own contacts that you've made. So any logs from that form that are made just by you instead of showing you everyone's. So this is the one that you would go to if you want to see notes and more extensive details. That's the same thing. Oh, okay. So this is, oops, sorry. This is a meetings log because you can also put meetings on there, and this is a contact log. So again, this shows you all the notes. It also has it where you can notify like the principal if you made a call or anything like that. That's one of those times when I use the email script because I want to be very specific about who I send the email to and in which case. This is the Trojan Buck. So again, this is our incentive system. The students have their own dashboard where they can see how much they've earned, spent, and how much is in their bank currently, along with a balance graph and a bank statement that's broken down exactly as most bank statements are, with debit, credit, and balance. This is attached to that individualized standards tracker. So this is what I was talking about when teachers can look at how many standards each student or their students as a whole have mastered. Oh my goodness, that was a lot. Hopefully you were inspired by some of that and are able to kind of take that inspiration and go out there and learn everything there is to learn about Google Sheets and Data Studio and AppScripts. Again, this is my information. I have my work email there as well as my personal email. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, if you need any tips or tricks or any more inspiration, have any questions about anything that we're doing here at North College Hill, I'd be happy to share. But yeah, that's it. So I am going to take a break from talking for about 3 hours, hopefully. And like I said, reach out if you have any questions. All right.